isn't there historical evidence that the Bible was not changed or corrupted? Yeah, you just, Anthony just went through some of that. But yeah, at the end of the day, when someone says the Bible's been corrupted, first thing you need to do is ask, what do you mean by corrupted? Because you're going to see what's called equivocation. They're going to change the meaning of the word and so on. So if, for instance, you mean there are textual variants and you mean that you think that means corrupted, well, then every book of the ancient world has been corrupted because everything that's copied by human beings make mistakes. And that happens. That happens with the Quran, happens with the New Testament. Doesn't matter what it is. People make textual variants and so on. And lots of times it'll be things like, you're talking about the New Testament. Lots of the times it's just like spelling variants and so on. In other words, the name John can be spelled with one nu, that's an N, one N or two N's. So if you're copying it, you're going to write that how you write it. You know what I mean? If you spell it John with one N, you're going to spell it with one N. If you write it with two N's, you're going to write it with two N's. Notice that counts as a textual variant. So in other words, when people like Bart Ehrman are counting up the textual variants, those kinds of things count. So the issue is, at first, the books of the New Testament, they're all circulating as separate books. This is what textual criticism does. If a person who's copying the Gospel of John in, let's say, Arabia makes a mistake, well, a person copying the Gospel of John in Egypt or in Greece is not going to make the same mistake. So textual critics can line up these manuscripts, and we have thousands of them, can line up these manuscripts and say, okay, well, this one matches, this one matches, this one matches, this one matches, this one matches. This one from this area has a different word here. Okay, it's pretty easy to figure out what's going on. But what are your thoughts on this, Anthony?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and one other thing, so scholars are able to apply principles to the manuscripts and collate them and determine what the original reading was, which manuscripts reflect the accurate reading. And that's pretty roundly agreed that this is what they've done, this is what they're able to do, and there's not really much question about the vast majority of the Old or New Testament. But what's interesting here, relevant to Islam, is nobody thinks that what these things originally said was the religion of Muhammad.
Yeah,
it's just.
In fact, I asked Bart Ehrman about that. It's like, hey, do you ever, as you're going through here, and lots of Muslims think, oh, the earlier you get, the more things are going to line up with Islam. Do you ever get to a Jesus who's not Son of God, who died on the cross and rose from the dead? Do you ever get to that? No. You never find that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you never, and that's why I pointed out, hey, you need to tell me exactly what you mean by corruption, because the Muslim needs corruption of basic fundamental doctrines. You never get that. You don't get that. You don't get that anywhere. What's more, if you even ask people who might use the language of corruption, ask them what they mean. So ask Bart Ehrman what he means. Do you remember his debate with Dan Wallace? And Dan Wallace was asking him, saying, hey, I'd like to know which Bart Ehrman I'm debating today. Am I debating the scholarly Bart Ehrman? Yeah, the scholarly Bart Ehrman who acknowledges that the New Testament is the best preserved book of the ancient world, and you can calculate, you can figure this out. Or am I debating the popular one who talks in a popular level and, oh yeah, it's all these variants and so on? Which one am I talking to?
Yeah, Ehrman's a character when it comes to some of that. He knows what's provocative, what's going to sell. He can push out these books that are going to really be eaten up by people. I remember there's a scholar named Charles Gieshin who wrote a book called Angelomorphic Christology. And the point that he's making is the Old Testament presents the angel of the Lord as a divine figure. The New Testament presents Christ as that figure. And this is a neglected area he's claiming. So Ehrman, in the book, remember he wrote a book called How Jesus Became God. And what's interesting, so a lot of people don't pay attention to where Ehrman's proficiency is, his competence is. And so because he's a scholar and he writes on a theological topic, they assume that he is credentialed in the field. Ehrman is not a credentialed theologian, not a credentialed philosopher.
Keep in mind, I like Bart Ehrman as a guy. He seems like a guy you could hang out with. Yeah, he's funny. He's fun to have a discussion with and so on. But yeah, I'm like you in that. I mean, my field and my area of specialization in philosophy is The Problem of Evil. I read some of his book because keep in mind, The Problem of Evil is actually why he's an atheist. Muslims think, oh, he read the New Testament. Oh, I have to reject religion. No, no, no. He said in his book, God's Problem, that it's because of the problem of evil that he rejects belief in God. But yeah, I was reading his book on the problem of evil, and it's, it's exactly what you would expect from a sort of popular level, nothing sophisticated. But in his debates, I mean, he's appealing to a kind of like Bayesian sort of reasoning based on Hume's critique of miracles. And it's like, what, like at the philosophical level, people know that Hume had massive problems in his reasoning and so on. And Ehrman's just taking it for granted that this is an airtight argument. It's a massively, massively problematic argument. But anyway, he doesn't seem to be aware of it.
Yeah. So this is funny. Here's the reason I brought this up. So Ehrman ventures off the reservation. He's a textual scholar, and he's a good textual scholar. There's useful material there. When he does popular books, he says things in ways that are going to be provocative to Christians and ultimately be relished by anti-Christians. But especially when he gets into theology, though, he makes claims that just aren't true. And he quotes Gieshen, and what he claims Gieshen is arguing is that Jesus was originally just viewed as a created angel. Right. He ignores the fact that Gieshen is arguing that the angel of the Lord is not a reference to a creature. It's a Old Testament phrase for a theophany, a divine person. So Gieshen found out about this, and he wrote a response to Ehrman. Check out the last line. Now, those that aren't familiar with Ehrman's books might miss it, but he says, this is the last couple of lines. He says, I have attempted to quote and represent Ehrman's understanding of Paul's Christology accurately. He should have done the same with my understanding of Paul's Christology, which is radically different from his. After all, I would hope that a renowned textual critic who wrote the book misquoting Jesus would be more careful when using quotations from other scholars.
Interesting.
That's classic.
Yeah, it's pretty sick burn there. Super chat for Snight. Thanks.